Imagine checking your phone on an ordinary Tuesday morning. You're scrolling through social media, sipping coffee, making plans for the weekend. Then, in less time than it takes to brew that coffee, everything you know ceases to exist. Not eventually, not gradually, in 10 minutes. This isn't science fiction. This is the reality of nuclear war in the 21st century, a threat that never truly disappeared. It just faded from our collective anxiety. Today, we're going to walk through exactly what would happen if nuclear war began right now. We'll follow three critical windows. The first 10 minutes, when the weapons fly. The first 10 days, when the immediate aftermath unfolds. And the first 10 years, when survivors face a transformed planet. Take a breath. Let's begin. The first 10 minutes. The launch somewhere in a bunker beneath Colorado, or a facility in Russia, or a submarine deep in the Pacific, sensors detect something impossible. Infrared satellites designed to spot the heat signature of ballistic missile launches suddenly light up like a Christmas tree. Not one launch. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. In these first 60 seconds, there's controlled chaos. Officers verify the data again and again, because false alarms have happened before. But this time, every system confirms the same nightmare. Intercontinental ballistic missiles are in the air. Launch facilities across multiple sites have fired. This is real. By minute 2, phones are ringing in capitals across the world. The president is woken or pulled from a meeting. Military advisors are speaking in rapid, clipped tones. But here's the terrifying truth. ICBMs travel at roughly 15,000 miles per hour. From launch to impact on the opposite side of the world takes about 30 minutes. Half that time if they're submarine launched from closer range. Minute 3 to 5. The doctrine is clear. Use them or lose them. If nuclear missiles are confirmed in the air, the targeted nation has perhaps 20 minutes to respond before its own launch sites are destroyed. There's no time for diplomacy, no time for negotiation, no time for peace talks. There's only the protocol that's been drilled 1,000 times. The nuclear football, the briefcase containing launch codes, is opened. Authentication codes are verified, and the counterstrike is ordered. Within 3 to 5 minutes of the first launch, retaliatory missiles are leaving their silos, their submarines, their mobile launchers. What started as one nation's attack has now become mutual assured destruction in action. In cities across the targeted nations, emergency broadcast systems activate at minutes 6 to 10. In places with advanced warning systems, sirens begin to wail. People receive alerts on their phones, messages that seem surreal, impossible. Ballistic missile threat inbound. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. But what shelter? Most people are at work, at school, in traffic. Modern cities haven't maintained Cold War-era public bomb shelters. Families are separated. Parents frantically call children. The highways instantly gridlock as millions try to flee, though there's nowhere to flee to fast enough. Underground, in hardened bunkers, government officials and military commanders watch trajectories on screens. They know which cities are targeted. They know the yields of the warheads. They can calculate, almost to the second, when detonation will occur. At minute 10, the first warheads reach their targets. The first 10 days, immediate aftermath day 1. Modern nuclear weapons are almost incomprehensibly powerful. A single warhead can range from 100 kilotons to over a megaton, 50 to 500 times more powerful than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. A full-scale nuclear exchange between major powers would involve hundreds to thousands of warheads. The initial detonations create fireballs that reach temperatures of 100 million degrees Celsius, hotter than the core of the sun. These fireballs vaporize everything within a mile radius instantly. Buildings, vehicles, people. They don't burn or melt. They simply cease to exist as molecular bonds break apart. The blast waves follow milliseconds later, traveling at hundreds of miles per hour, flattening structures up to 5 or 10 miles from ground zero depending on the weapon's yield. Concrete buildings are reduced to rubble. Glass becomes millions of projectiles traveling faster than bullets. The overpressure ruptures lungs and organs of anyone caught in the open. Then comes the thermal radiation, an intense flash of heat that ignites everything flammable within sight of the blast for miles around. People 15 miles away suffer third-degree burns. The fires begin immediately, thousands of them, and they quickly grow into firestorms, self-sustaining infernos that create their own weather systems, with winds exceeding 100 miles per hour sucking oxygen and fuel into a hellish vortex. Major cities: New York, Moscow, Beijing, London, Los Angeles, Paris, are hit multiple times to ensure destruction. Within 6 hours, the greatest centers of human civilization are burning ruins. Days 2 to 3, high-altitude nuclear detonations create electromagnetic pulses that fry unshielded electronics across continental areas. Power grids collapse instantly. Phones are dead. Internet infrastructure is destroyed. Modern vehicles with electronic systems won't start. Hospital equipment fails mid-surgery. Water treatment plants stop. Refrigeration ceases. Survivors in less damaged areas face a sudden regression to pre-electrical civilization, but without the knowledge or infrastructure to sustain it. Medicines requiring refrigeration spoil. Communication becomes impossible beyond shouting distance. There's no way to coordinate rescue efforts or distribute supplies. Days 4 to 7. The mushroom clouds we associate with nuclear weapons aren't just symbolic, they're deadly. These clouds carry vaporized material from the bomb, the warhead casing, and everything on the ground that was vaporized, all made radioactive. This material rises high into the atmosphere, then begins to fall back to Earth as radioactive fallout. Fallout patterns depend on winds and weather, creating radiation zones that can extend hundreds of miles downwind from detonation sites. The invisible killer causes acute radiation sickness in the exposed: nausea, vomiting, hemorrhaging, organ failure. Those who received high doses die within days or weeks. Others face cancer and genetic damage that will manifest over years. Survivors hide indoors when they can, but without working Geiger counters or radiation monitors, they're navigating blind. Water sources are contaminated. Crops are poisoned. Even the air carries radioactive particles. Days 8 to 10. Perhaps the most terrifying consequence isn't immediate. It's what's happening to the atmosphere. The massive firestorms in burning cities inject unprecedented amounts of smoke and soot into the stratosphere. Unlike normal smoke that falls with rain, this smoke rises above the weather layer. By day 10, sunlight across entire continents begins to dim noticeably. Temperatures start to drop. This is just the beginning of nuclear winter, a phenomenon that will define the next phase of survival. The first 10 years, a changed planet months 1 to 6. The smoke from hundreds of burning cities spreads globally, forming a layer that blocks sunlight. Studies estimate that temperatures could drop by 20 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit in affected regions. But more critical than temperature is light. Photosynthesis slows dramatically. Crops that weren't destroyed in the initial blasts now fail in the fields. The growing season is disrupted across entire continents. In regions that relied on imports for food, which is most of the world, mass starvation begins. Even nations not directly targeted in the war face agricultural collapse. Survivors face impossible choices. Food stockpiles run out. Store shelves were emptied in the panic of day 1. Hunting and foraging become critical survival skills. But with millions competing for the same wild resources, game populations crash. Fishing becomes difficult as radiation concentrates in marine ecosystems. The death toll from starvation in this period dwarfs the initial casualties from the blasts themselves. Some estimates suggest that in a full-scale nuclear war, starvation would claim more lives than the weapons, potentially billions. Years 1 to 3. Social structures break down under the pressure of survival. Governments, already decapitated by strikes on capitals, cannot maintain authority or provide services. Currency becomes worthless when there's nothing to buy. Law enforcement disappears when officers must feed their own families. Communities fragment into smaller groups, some cooperative, others predatory. Warlords emerge in some regions. Refugee populations, fleeing radiation and starvation, number in the hundreds of millions, creating humanitarian crises beyond any historical precedent. Disease spreads rapidly through malnourished, stressed populations living in unsanitary conditions. The few remaining functional areas with resources become fortresses, turning away desperate refugees. Medical care regresses by a century or more. Simple infections become death sentences. Childhood mortality skyrockets. Years 4 to 7. Eventually, the soot settles or is washed from the atmosphere. Sunlight returns, though the damage to the ozone layer from the nuclear explosions means UV radiation is higher than before. Temperatures begin to normalize, though the climate has been fundamentally altered. Small-scale agriculture resumes in less contaminated areas. Survivors who preserved seeds and knowledge begin the slow work of rebuilding food systems. But the Earth's population has been reduced by 50 to 90% depending on the scale of the war. Major cities remain radioactive ruins, exclusion zones that will be dangerous for generations. Technology has regressed dramatically. Without complex supply chains, semiconductor manufacturing, or global trade, survivors rely on simpler, more maintainable technology. Information from the pre-war world exists in books and some hardened data storage, but the capacity to use advanced technology has been lost. Years 8 to 10, a decade after the war, Earth is fundamentally transformed. Large areas remain too radioactive for human habitation. Radiation-resistant plants and animals begin to recolonize these zones, but mutations are common. Cancer rates in surviving populations are extraordinarily high. Average human lifespan has dropped by decades. Small communities scattered across less affected regions represent humanity's future. Some have electricity from small-scale hydroelectric or wind. Some have re-established basic manufacturing. But the global civilization of instant communication, international travel, and coordinated action is gone, possibly for centuries. The survivors carry trauma that will echo through generations. Children born after the war grow up in a world that seems post-apocalyptic, though for them it's the only world they know. Stories of the world before, cities that touched the clouds, vehicles that flew, devices that contained all human knowledge, sound like myths. 10 minutes to start, 10 days to devastate, 10 years to transform Earth forever. The scenario we've described isn't speculation. It's based on military analyses, climate science, and historical data from Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and decades of nuclear testing. The weapons exist right now, in silos, on submarines, in bunkers. The doctrine exists. The tensions exist. The only thing preventing this timeline from beginning is the continued choice, made every day, not to press the button. It's a choice that must be made correctly 100% of the time, forever. It only needs to fail once. The good news, if there is any, is that prevention remains possible. Nuclear disarmament, improved diplomatic channels, updated military doctrines that emphasize de-escalation, these reduce the risk. But they require public awareness, political will, and sustained effort. Because once those first 10 minutes begin, there's no going back. There's no undo button. There's only the timeline we've described, and the small, scattered groups of survivors trying to remember what was lost. The clock isn't ticking yet. Let's make sure it never starts.